Hey there, it's CJ Willie and I'm cracking a pack. Today is pack 15 in my science project of cracking a 1990 top Cello box. Check out my preview video for the explanation on how this science project will test the theory to see if I can build a complete set from a Cello box. I've added the link to my 1990 top Cello box preview video in the description below. So, with all the packs that I crack, I will share my thoughts and memories about some of the players or cards. After I've cracked the pack, I'm going to choose the best card of the pack. Doesn't have to be a rookie or superstar or even a Hall of Famer. It can be something funny about the player, maybe some memory I had from back in the day. Maybe the photo looks goofy enough. So let's get to cracking. We are now at pack 15. Let's get it out of there. Okay, we are still looking for, I think, just one of the Chase rookie cards, Larry Walker. Check out my other videos to see the other cool cards that I've been able to pull from the packs. Okay, all right, here we go. We're going to start off with Scott Bradley, catcher with the Mariners. If I remember correctly, he was a part-time catcher with the Mariners, kind of a platoon. I think there was a couple of years where he was actually their starting catcher and got the majority of the bats. Okay, Doug Strange, backup infielder, utility player, spent a number of years getting brief stops in the major leagues with a few different teams. Howard Johnson, all-star card. Howard Johnson, my memory of him, played with the Mets. He was part of that really tough Mets team that the Cardinals would always face in the National League East. And Hojo seemed to get a lot of home runs against the Cardinals. Nelson Santovania, if I remember, I think he was a catcher. Let's check out the back, see if I got it right. Yep, catcher. Spent a few years as a backup. Glenn Allen Hill, so I think we're seeing some more duplicates. Came up with a lot of promise. Power hitter. He could hit the ball a country mile. And he stuck around for a number of years with a couple of different major league teams, the Blue Jays, the Cubs, I think the Indians. Had pop in his bat, but making contact was not his forte. David Wells, early David Wells card. David Wells, interestingly enough, if we take a look at the back, spent a number of years in the minor leagues. Like his first year in the minor leagues was 1982. And so he came up, was mainly a reliever. And then a little bit later on, you can see in 1989, he still hadn't had many career games started. Eventually, as we all know, became a starting pitcher and had quite a bit of success. Donald Harris was a first-round draft pick by the Rangers. I don't even remember if he spent a day in the major leagues. Tim Burke, when he came up, he was a closer with the Expos. Replaced Jeff Reardon, who got traded to the Twins. Burke had a few relatively successful years with the Expos, but then petered out and became more of a setup guy or middle inning guy. Carmelo Martinez, he was with the Cubs and the Padres, maybe the Tigers as well. Mainly was a platoon guy, fourth outfielder. Jose Uribe, here's a card. Maybe I can. The Fleer version of this, gets listed for $350,000. Maybe I can get $350,000 for the Giants card. It's really all of his cards, were uncorrected errors because of the birth date. Fleer, I think, had it differently, where they listed in 1960. Topps had 1959. I mean, he was born in the Dominican Republic before 9/11. Most of the guys from there had, I don't even know how many of them had legit birth dates. Dwight Evans, I think he's a borderline Hall of Famer. If Jim Rice is in, Dwight Evans, I think should get a lot of consideration. I also think Dale Murphy should be considered as well. I remember the Dwight Evans era, the Dale Murphy era. My opinion is if Jim Rice is in, Dwight Evans and Dale Murphy should be in. Bob Rogers, manager with the Expos. Pete O'Brien spent a number of years with the Rangers. I think this was his first year with the Indians. Yep, Rangers, and then 89 with the Rangers. Pretty consistent hitter, would pop around 20 home runs, 70 to 80 RBIs as a starting first baseman. I've talked a bit about Darrell Evans in previous videos. He holds the record for being the oldest player to lead their league in home runs. And I believe that was 1985 with 40 home runs. You can barely see it. Yep, 1985 with 40 home runs. He had a lot of pop, but hit for a relatively low average, and surprisingly enough, for a guy with a lot of power, didn't drive in a lot of runners. So maybe he was the guy that would hit the solo bombs instead of like a 2 run or 3 run homer. Dave Clark, pinch hitter, backup outfielder. There's our Topps Company store. Got to send away, get ourselves that cool binder. All right, flip it around. Damaso Garcia came up with the Blue Jays. Was their starting second baseman until Manny Lee and Tony Fernandez arrived on the scene. So early Blue Jays had Damaso Garcia as the second baseman, Alfredo Griffin as the shortstop. He moved on to the Expos. I think he spent a year with the Braves, spent a year on the disabled list. Yeah, his first season with the Braves, missed the entire year, came back for a little bit with the Braves, and then I believe 1989 was his last year in the major leagues. Andy Allenson came up with the Indians, was pretty good his rookie year. After that, wasn't as successful. And then Sandy Alomar Jr. Was traded from the Padres to the Indians, and Allison's career pretty much petered out. Rich Yeti, is usually how you see a lot of people joke around with his name. Middle innings reliever. Mike Aldretti, pinch hitter, kind of backup outfielder, first baseman. Aldretti has been a hitting coach, so an assistant hitting coach and a hitting coach with, I think, like the A's and the Cardinals. Lonnie Smith started with started with the Phillies, maybe even before then with the Indians. Came over to the Cardinals in a trade, was part of their 1982 World Series team. Smith, early on in his career, stole bases and hit for a decent average. His nickname was Skates because it was always an adventure in the outfield to see if he'd make the defensive play or not. He got traded to the Royals, kind of bounced around for a little bit, reinvented his career with the Braves, and had some success in both average and power, and notably was on their World Series team of 91 and their league championships teams. My memory of Lonnie Smith was in the 1991 World Series, getting duped out by Kirby Puckett, I think, at center field in Game 7 of the World Series. Could have easily scored on a hit, but because he got faked out, he only made it to third and didn't score. Rickey Henderson, Hall of Famer. I really liked Rickey Henderson. I know he kind of had an ego and was a little bit of an odd duck, but the dude played until I think it was like 2006, 2007. I mean, over 20 years in the big leagues, 3,000 hits, career stolen base leader, awesome player. Greg Hibbard came up as a starter with the White Sox. Spent the majority of his career as kind of a middle innings reliever, spot starter. Orel Hershiser, Bulldog. It was really hard for the Cardinals to face Orel Hershiser. In the mid-'80s to the late 80s, he was, a great pitcher. My memory of him was in the 1988 season. He set the consecutive inning streak of allowing 0 runs, and that eventually parlayed into the playoffs and the World Series as the Dodgers took the 1988 World Series. Felix Fermin, kind of the definition of a no-hit, great glove infielder. He was the shortstop with the Indians, and they picked Omar Vizquel up later on and pushed Felix Fermin out to kind of a utility backup role. Neil Heaton spent a number of years kind of as a spot starter, lefty reliever, Pirates, Expos, a couple other clubs. Oh, Barry Bonds. Okay, that's a cool card. Early card of Barry Bonds when he was with the Pirates. This is what I think Barry Bonds would look like today if he hadn't got all mixed up with the steroids. Before the steroids, Barry Bonds was an awesome player. Surefire Hall of Famer. Just like Roger Clemens, I think a little bit of ego and greed in getting personal, records, MLB records, kind of drove them into it. Barry Bonds, just fantastic all-around baseball player. Jimmy Key. I really like Jimmy Key. He was a starting pitcher with the Blue Jays. Came up as a reliever. Here's my memory of Jimmy Key. I remember in his rookie year, which, if I remember correctly, was 1984. So he was a reliever. I remember watching NBC Baseball Game of the Week. Jimmy Key's pitching. For whatever reason, he got busted throwing a spitball. Got kicked out of the game and suspended for a few games. I'll still remember that no matter how long after his career as a starting pitcher and a successful one. I still remember him getting busted for throwing a spitball in 1984. Scott Bankhead, he was on the USA Olympic team with like Mark McGuire, Corey Snyder, Oda B. McDowell, high draft pick to the Mariners. As a starting pitcher, had some early career success, but either he got hurt, but his career pretty much phased out after the early 90s. Kurt McCaskill, starting pitcher with the Angels, had a really good run of a few years of, pretty successful stats. He hurt his either pitching shoulder or elbow, and then after that didn't have as much success as he did early on in his career. Mike Flanagan spent a number of years with the Orioles as a starting pitcher, eventually moved over to the Blue Jays. I think he was part of the Orioles broadcast team, and then unfortunately lost his life a few years ago. Okay, final card is Pat Tabler. Came up with the Indians, moved over to the Royals. He was an all-star with the Royals, could hit for a relatively decent average, wasn't very good as a defensive player, mainly stuck kind of third base, first base, but the vast majority of the later part of his career, mid-20s onward, he was a defensive liability. So as you can see, they kind of tried him in the outfield and then threw him out to DH, but was a pretty good hitter for average, during a number of those years. Okay, favorite card or best card out of the pack? For me, I'm going to go with, we've already gone through those. You know what? I think I'm going to go with Orel Hershiser. He's not a Hall of Famer. Didn't quite have the stats to reach the Hall of Fame. But in the 80s, Orel Hershiser was a Bulldog. That was his nickname. I remember the Cardinals playing the Dodgers in the 85 National League Championship Series. They had a hard time getting past Orel Hershiser. He shut them down. Like I said, the memory I have most of Orel Hershiser, 1988 season, 59 2/3 consecutive innings of scoreless streak. He also, in that 1988 year, led the league in wins, innings, complete games, shutouts, and for whatever crazy reason, must have barely missed earned run average. He was a shutdown pitcher, and in the 88 playoff run, he was a key element of the Dodgers making it to the World Series and winning the World Series. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did like it, please subscribe and share. Take some time to tell me in the comment section who you thought was the best player or favorite card out of the pack. Until next time, when I crack pack number 16 for my 1990 Top Cello box, remember, I'm doing this for science.